While helping my parents with house renovations, I went to the garage for tools, then froze. Dad's voice, low and bitter, "We need to cut him out of the will before he drains us." Mom didn't even flinch, already in motion. Then colder still, "Our lawyer says we can reclaim the business loan." I returned inside, tools in hand, forcing a smile like a mask. Kept working like I hadn't heard a thing. 3 days later, 49 desperate messages. All begging. Anyway, let's dive in. I never thought I'd find myself here, spilling my story to strangers on the internet in the dead of night. Just me, a half-empty glass of whiskey, and way too many thoughts. I'm Jacob. I'm 35. And I built my construction business from the ground up, starting with nothing but a beat-up old Ford F-150 and a second-hand toolbox. Now I've got 3 crews running jobs all over the county. My hands, covered in calluses and small scars, souvenirs from years of lifting lumber and swinging hammers. It's not some high-rise office gig, but it's honest work. It pays well enough. And most important, it's mine. Built it with nothing but sweat and stubbornness. That last part, mine, has always been a sore spot with my folks, Thomas and Linda. They came from that polished, upper-middle-class world, perfect lawn, country club brunches, golf on Sundays. They had dreams of me going to their fancy college, getting a business degree, and wearing a suit every day. But me? I chose work boots and power tools. And my hands? They became a quiet rebellion they never really forgave. Whenever they introduced me, it was always with this awkward pause. "This is our son, Jacob. He's in construction." Like I was running some shady operation out back, not remodeling kitchens and adding real value to people's homes. My mom had this tight little smile she'd wear when she was trying to hide her disappointment. And without fail, she'd reach up and touch her pearl necklace like it gave her strength. Dad had a different move, a quick wave of the hand and this specific throat-clearing sound that could make me feel like nothing, even across a crowded room. For 35 years, I chased something I couldn't quite catch, their approval. A ghost that always stayed just out of reach. I gave it everything I had. Pulled decent grades, even with the pressure. Tried talking to Dad about golf, though I couldn't care less. Sat through charity dinners with Mom, pretending to care about rich people's problems, like how hard it was to pick a caterer. Back when I was just starting my business, I took money from them. Just enough to buy my first set of equipment and keep things going. They called it a business loan. I told myself it was a sign they believed in me. We didn't sign anything, didn't agree on terms. It felt more like a reluctant gesture, a way for them to stay connected, in case I somehow managed to succeed. I convinced myself it was their way of showing support. That was my blind spot. Believing they were trying to help, not control. More than anything, I wanted to hear them say, "We're proud of you, Jacob." That one simple sentence was like the Holy Grail to me. Over the past few years, things just fell into this uncomfortable pattern. We did the polite holiday dinners, had short, awkward phone calls. My older sister, Claire, she's 38, was always the star. Business degree, big corporate job, married into money. She was exactly what they wanted in a child. Our relationship? Distant but polite. Nothing beyond surface-level conversations and a few shared childhood memories that we probably remembered differently anyway. We stayed in each other's orbit only because of our parents, like 2 satellites circling the same sun, never quite colliding. I kept telling myself that this was what family was. You take the good with the not so good. Then came the renovation. Mom and Dad decided to add a sunroom to their already oversized house. Dad called me, his voice had this unfamiliar edge of humility. "Jacob, we were wondering, with your experience, would you be willing to handle the structural work? Maybe some of the framing? Of course, we'd pay you your normal rate." It was the closest he'd ever come to saying he respected my work. And I felt it, this tiny flicker of warmth in my chest. Maybe, just maybe, this was the moment. A chance to finally prove I wasn't the disappointment they always made me feel like. I said yes right away, and even knocked a good chunk off the price. For family, I told them, trying to keep the hope out of my voice. I got to work on the plans, teamed up with their architect, and started demolition and framing. It was tough, sweaty work, but it felt good. Being back in that house was weird, though. Every picture on the wall, every carefully placed chair, it all felt both familiar and strange, like I was walking through a museum of a life I no longer belonged to. The scent of wood polish and wealth clashed hard with the sawdust and grit I brought in on my clothes. That whole week, something felt off. And not just the usual stuff, like Dad getting mad about his golf swing or Mom stressing over her garden club. This was different. Heavier. The air felt thick, like the kind of heat that comes right before a thunderstorm. They were acting strange, checking their phones constantly, whispering behind closed doors, cutting off conversations the second I walked in. "Oh, Jacob, we were just talking about the weather," Mom would chirp, too cheery, her smile a little too forced. Her hand always drifted up to those pearls, like she was trying to ground herself. "Dad?" He just cleared his throat in that way that always made my stomach twist into a knot. They started slipping off into other rooms to take phone calls, their voices low and tight with urgency. After 35 years, I'd gotten pretty good at picking up on their particular brand of discomfort. Something felt off, like whatever they were whispering about had everything to do with me. I tried to brush it off. Maybe they were under financial strain and didn't want to burden me. Maybe the renovation was turning out more expensive than they'd planned. So, I didn't ask. I just kept my head down, kept hammering and measuring and framing, still hoping that somehow, building this sunroom might also build a bridge between us. But pretending everything was fine. That part wore me down. It was like putting on a show every day, all while that knot in my stomach kept pulling tighter. Their house, once just a place that felt stiff but familiar, started to turn cold. Every creak in the floorboards felt like it was judging me. Every perfectly straight photo frame seemed to stare at me like I didn't belong. Thursday afternoon rolled around. I was making good progress with the framing but needed a specific saw attachment from the garage. I wiped my forehead with the back of my hand, smearing sweat, dust, and dirt across my skin, then headed out the side door. That garage wasn't just a garage. It was practically a time capsule, stacked to the ceiling with decades of their life. Boxes of old paperwork, rusted golf clubs, half-empty fertilizer bags, and plastic bins faded by time and sunlight, packed with who knows what. The air in there hit me like a wall: gasoline, moldy paper, fertilizer. It reeked of the past. A scent that tugged at some long-buried nostalgia, but also pressed down on me, heavy and choking. As I reached for the handle, I heard them. Their voices, quiet, sharp, just inside the garage. Talking about me. My hand froze mid-reach. My heart didn't just race, it tried to punch its way out of my chest. Every ounce of blood in my body felt like it turned to ice. And then I heard it. "I still can't believe how useless he is." It was my father's voice. Normally calm and calculated, but now laced with raw frustration and disdain. "We need to cut him out of the will before he drains us dry." Drains them dry. Useless. After everything I'd done. After donating my time, giving them my expertise, slashing my rates just to help them build that stupid sunroom. After years of showing up. And then Mom chimed in, her voice cool and clinical. "Already working on it. My lawyer says we can even take back the business loan." The business loan. The money I once believed was a symbol of their belief in me, now turned into a weapon. They weren't just cutting me out. They wanted to claw back whatever they could, as if I'd been some parasite living off their generosity. Not a son. A burden. A liability. The betrayal didn't just sting, it knocked the wind out of me. I bent forward instinctively, like I'd taken a gut punch. My lungs burned, like they were wrapped in barbed wire. Everything I had bottled up, the little digs, the long silences, the constant need to prove myself, crashed into that one moment. That one conversation behind the door. That was it. That was the truth. Not the polite dinners or forced smiles. This was who they really were. My family. And somehow, I stood up. It hurt like hell, my chest felt like it was on fire, but something inside me went solid. Cold and hard. I wasn't going to let them see me break. Not then. Not there. I opened the garage door. The rusty springs groaned and rattled, doing a good job covering the sound of my jagged breath. I stepped inside, keeping my face neutral as I scanned the cluttered space for the attachment I needed. They were near the back, stiff and startled, like kids caught sneaking candy before dinner. Only this time, the candy was my entire future. "Oh, Jacob. We were just, looking for some old photos," Mom stammered. Her hand fluttered straight to her pearls, her classic tell. "Yeah, just clearing some things out," Dad added, not looking me in the eye, giving his signature throat clearing that used to make me feel small as a kid. "Found it," I said, my voice flat as a level board. Not angry. Just, hollow. I grabbed the attachment and turned toward the door. All right. Back to work. And I left that garage. But I didn't leave whole. I left a piece of myself behind. The hopeful part. The part of me that still craved their pride like it was oxygen. Back at the frame, I attached the blade to the saw, hands trembling, not just from fatigue, but from the wave of pain and fury I was holding back with every fiber of my being. I forced myself to focus. Measure. Cut. Nail. Every swing of that hammer wasn't just for the sunroom, it was to bury the version of me that kept trying to win them over. When they came out to check on the progress, asking questions about the wood, the timeline, I smiled. A perfect, practiced smile. Inside, though, I felt like I was made of glass, one wrong move from shattering. That day, the smell of freshly cut lumber didn't bring peace. It made my stomach turn. When I packed up and headed home, I drove on autopilot. As soon as I shut my front door behind me, the mask fell. I dropped right to the floor in my living room, sawdust still clinging to my boots, and let the pain come. I cried. I yelled. I slammed my fists into the couch cushions until my knuckles throbbed. 35 years. 35 years of effort, and that's what I was to them. Useless. A drain. Something to be cut out and stripped for parts. But beneath all that hurt, something else started brewing. Something colder. Sharper. They'd made their move. And now it was my turn. They weren't just talking behind my back, they were laying out a plan. This wasn't some petty family argument. It was a full-blown ambush aimed at rewriting my past. They weren't just stirring the pot. They were reaching into my future, trying to reshape it, rewrite the history in their favor. And that so-called business loan. It was never really a loan, not in any proper sense of the word. It was pitched to me when I had nothing, framed as a helping hand to build something I could be proud of. Not for glory, but at least something they could brag about at dinner parties. Now they were twisting it, turning that gesture into a threat. A weapon. And I wasn't about to sit back and let them do it. I've spent years in construction, I know what happens when the foundation is rotten. Everything crumbles. My family's foundation. It was bad from the start. But the life I'd built. My business. That was solid, and I'd worked too hard to let it fall apart now. They wanted to fight dirty. Fine. I could be smart about it. I opened up my laptop and dove into my old records, emails, bank statements, anything from the past 10 years that might help. I had this vague memory of signing something, but it felt more like a formality to shut them up than a real, binding agreement. Still, I needed clarity. So I called Ryan, an old friend from high school who'd become a real estate lawyer. I wasn't thrilled about dragging him into this mess, but I needed someone who could see it clearly, without the emotional baggage. I laid everything out, what I'd overheard, the weird changes in my parents' behavior, the so-called loan, the will. Ryan listened quietly, like a rock in the storm I was getting tossed around in. When he finally spoke, it wasn't some fancy legal jargon. He just said, "Man, I'm really sorry you're going through this." And that simple sentence hit harder than I expected. It made me realize just how isolated I'd become, how I'd convinced myself this kind of manipulation was normal. "That's messed up," he added. "Family drama like that cuts the deepest." He helped me make sense of it all. Told me that inheritance laws can be tricky, but unless they'd made legally provable promises, cutting someone out was totally doable. As for the loan, without a signed agreement that laid out specific terms, and especially after all this time, it'd be nearly impossible for them to enforce it legally. Basically, they were trying to pull a fast one, acting like a gift was a loan, retroactively. His words felt like someone bracing a beam under me when I thought the floor might give way. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't worthless. I told him about the renovation too, all the time and materials I'd already sunk into their place. That's when his lawyer instincts kicked in. "Wait, you're a contractor, right? Doing the work on their house? Have you sent them an invoice for anything yet?" I admitted I hadn't. I figured I'd deal with the billing after the framing was done, maybe give them a break, because they're family. That thought left a bitter taste. Ryan didn't flinch. "Okay, listen. If there's any kind of agreement, even if it's implied, you can file a mechanic's lien on the property. That's a legal tool to make sure you get paid for what you've added in value." He said it would stop them from selling or refinancing until it was dealt with. It would hit them right where it hurt, their project, their property. And it wasn't revenge. It was smart, it was legal, and it was fair. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about standing up for myself, proving I wasn't just someone they could use and toss aside. The next day, I got to work. Pulled together all the receipts, the estimates, kept track of my hours, and drafted a clean, formal invoice, even included the family discount I'd been planning. Meanwhile, I kept digging through my old digital files. Then I struck gold. Buried deep in an old cloud folder I'd forgotten about, back from when I helped them set up a new computer, was a scanned draft labeled Jacob Loan Terms. My name on it, but no signature from me. Just typed up terms with insane interest rates and a clause that let them call the loan due whenever they felt like it. And in the margin, a note in my mom's handwriting: "Ensure this is legally sound to protect assets/leverage inheritance discussion." That one sentence chilled me to the bone. It wasn't a helping hand. It was a leash they planned to yank the moment I stepped out of line. Seeing that in writing, proof of how they saw me, lit a fire in my chest. It hurt, sure, but it also cleared my head. They weren't just being cold. They were being calculated. Manipulative. Predatory. This wasn't just paranoia anymore. It was a pattern, and I had evidence. Ryan looped in one of his colleagues who specialized in property law. We laid out everything. The game plan was simple but sharp. File the lien. Dispute the loan as illegitimate based on the lack of a signed contract and the contents of the draft. And most importantly, don't get emotional. Keep it legal. Keep it clean. It felt unreal. I never thought I'd be going up against my own parents in court. Everything inside me screamed that family should be sacred. That you don't sue your mom and dad. But they were the ones who broke that bond when they started scheming. They'd shown me what family meant to them: a transaction. A strategy. A means to control. So that Monday morning, just 3 days after I accidentally overheard everything, my lawyer filed the paperwork for the mechanic's lien. It was official. The claim was officially filed. Things were in motion now, and there was no undoing it. I tried to carry on with my day, checking in on the crews, signing off on deliveries. Just another Monday on the outside. But inside? I was on edge. I kept waiting for the hammer to drop. And sure enough, it did. Right around lunch, my phone buzzed. Just one message to start, from my mom. "Jacob, call me right away. There's an issue with the house." Then Dad chimed in. "What is this legal garbage? Call us now." And just like that, the floodgates opened. My phone wouldn't stop vibrating, felt like it was welded to my leg. I finally pulled it out and just stared as the messages kept rolling in, stacking up on my lock screen. 49 texts in just a few hours. All from them. I didn't respond. Not one word. I just watched the unraveling. First came the confusion. What is this lien? Why did the county contact us? Why are our permits frozen? Then the frustration kicked in. How could you do this to us? You're trying to ruin everything. Your father is livid. Panic followed close behind. The contractors walked off. We can't move forward. Every day is costing us money. Then came the emotional manipulation. This is all a misunderstanding. Just call and we'll explain everything. You're making a big deal out of nothing. You're hurting your mother. Think about the family's reputation. And finally, the pleading. Please, just pick up the phone. We can fix this. Don't destroy your own family. We love you, son. Let's talk like a family. We love you, son. Hearing that now felt bitter. Like ash on my tongue, especially after what I'd heard them say just days earlier. Their reaction said it all. Raw panic. Desperation. I'd hit them where it hurt, their money and the spotless image they worked so hard to project. The renovation coming to a screeching halt. That was loud, public proof that something was very wrong. People were going to notice. Their neighbors, their friends. That perfect mask they wore was starting to crack, and I was the reason. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about satisfaction. It was about finally seeing them exposed. Their scramble confirmed what I already knew, this wasn't just a misunderstanding. This was calculated. They'd meant to cut me out, and now they were panicking because I didn't just roll over. They thought I was just some tradesman with a hammer. Turns out, I had the power to freeze their entire project with one legal move. Then I got a message from Claire. My sister. She kept it polite, gentle. Hey, Jake. What's going on with Mom and Dad? They seem really stressed about the house. Innocent enough. Just a concerned sibling checking in. And for a split second, I hoped, maybe she didn't know. Maybe she could be the one to break from the pack. But that second message landed like a punch to the gut. They mentioned something about a lien. Is that true? They're saying you're trying to cause problems. You should really just talk to them and work it out. Don't listen to outside voices. This is family business. We handle it internally. That phrase, don't listen to outside voices. It echoed things I'd heard my parents say for years. That whole tactic of isolation. Keep things in-house. Control the narrative. Don't let anyone else in. And there it was, her siding with them. Whether she knew everything or not didn't matter. She had picked a side, and it wasn't mine. That hit me harder than I expected. I realized then she wasn't just some neutral party caught in the crossfire. She was part of the same machine. Maybe she didn't know the full plan, but she sure wasn't questioning it. And she was more than willing to pressure me back into line. It stung differently than my parents' betrayal. This was the loss of something I'd still held out hope for. A sibling connection. A bridge that now burned in real time. It showed me something I had been avoiding. This family I had spent years trying to earn a real place in. They didn't just leave me out. They worked against me. Even the bond one thought I had with my sister was built on conditions I never agreed to. I didn't reply to any of them. Not to the panicked texts. Not to the veiled guilt trips. Not even to Claire's calm mask of concern. Instead, I sat in my apartment that night, letting the silence soak in. No buzzing phone. No raised voices. Just peace. The hurt was still there, sharp and deep, but it came with clarity now. I wasn't confused anymore. I wasn't doubting myself. They had shown me exactly who they were. And I finally believed them. They weren't my anchor. They were the storm I'd been trying to weather for years. In the weeks that followed, the legal process rolled forward. Tense back and forth between their lawyer and mine. They came out swinging at first, threatening lawsuits, painting me as some ungrateful kid ruining his loving parents' lives. But the draft I'd found, the one labeled Jacob Loan Terms, was my shield. It proved they had an agenda. It poked holes in every claim they made about me owing them. There was no signed agreement. No real contract. Just a document full of shady terms and an even shadier note from my mom. My lawyer laid it all out. We weren't bluffing. The lien was valid. The renovation work was real, documented, and unpaid. They were stuck. Their dream project now stood as a half-built skeleton in front of the whole neighborhood. And I was done pretending I owed them anything. They couldn't just sell the house now, and refinancing was off the table too. The legal costs were climbing fast, and every delay was costing them more. On top of that, their precious reputation, the one they guarded so fiercely, was starting to crack. When a major renovation grinds to a halt and lawyers get involved, people notice. And they talk. The flurry of panicked texts dried up. From that point on, everything came through attorneys, cold, formal, and distant. It wasn't some dramatic movie ending, and honestly, I didn't need it to be. What mattered was that it was real. We settled the whole business loan issue. My lawyer made a solid case. It was never a legitimate debt, and that draft document we uncovered showed their real intentions loud and clear. I didn't ask for more than what I'd originally been given years ago. No interest, no extra payout to smooth things over. It wasn't about squeezing money out of them. It was about setting things right. They also paid me fairly for the work I'd done on the renovation, materials, labor, the whole deal. That part was handled cleanly. As for the family relationship, that was over. Completely changed. There was no heartfelt apology, no big realization or tearful reunion. Even the last messages from their lawyers carried this bitter undertone, like I was the villain, the ungrateful kid who had the nerve to stand up for himself instead of playing along with their plan. All those familiar little things, mom's dramatic sighs, dad's dismissive tone, the passive-aggressive jabs, became just that, memories. Sharp ones. Painful ones. Reminders of a toxic cycle I'd finally broken out of. Claire never reached out again. I heard through the grapevine, some distant cousin, that she'd been telling people I took advantage of our parents. That I was always the difficult one. From the outside, their story still looked intact. But on the inside, things were cracked wide open. Damaged beyond repair. Losing the dream of the family I always hoped for. That hit hard. There's a special kind of grief that comes from letting go of people who are still alive, who just refuse to see you for who you really are. For a while, I carried that hollow ache, a quiet emptiness where the hope used to live. But something happened over time. That space. It didn't stay empty. It started filling up, with peace. With clarity. With self-respect. I stopped constantly second-guessing myself. I stopped trying to filter my decisions through some imaginary version of what they might approve of. I started seeing my own hands differently, not just as worn and calloused, but as capable. These hands built a life. They signed the papers that protected me. And they're still building, shaping a future that finally belongs to me. I turned my energy toward my business. Toward my friends, the people I now call my real family. The ones who stood by me when everything got messy, who cheered for my wins and had my back when it counted. These relationships were built on something solid, mutual respect, real honesty, and love without conditions. My apartment, filled with my tools and the kind of clutter that makes a place feel lived in, became more than just a place to sleep. It became my safe place. A far cry from the pristine, lifeless showroom of their house. And the lessons I took from all this? They weren't neat or simple. Not the kind you find wrapped up in a tidy little quote. They were raw. Carved deep into my experience. I learned that self-respect isn't some selfish act. It's necessary, especially when the people you love are the ones doing the most damage. I learned that setting boundaries isn't about revenge, it's about survival. And real love? Real family? It isn't about bloodlines. It's about trust. About showing up, being real, and choosing each other. Family isn't something you're just born into. Sometimes it's something you build yourself. And one more thing, that awful truth I overheard in the garage. It cut deep. But it also broke the spell. That truth set me free. It gave me permission to build something new. To finally step out of the shadows of their expectations and start building a life that's mine. That moment in the garage, it marked the end of one story. But it was also the start of a better one. One where I stopped being the son begging for approval, and became a man who built his own foundation, his own future.